Wagate Kwe Indigenous, Bijune Dodam, Nin Nawe Nangweabe, Bejid Mede, Onimuka Kosanuin. My name is Dr. Chantal Fiola. I am an assistant professor in the Urban and Inner City Studies Department. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all to C2C, Two-Spirit and Queer People of Color, a call to conversation with LGBT and Allies. I will be one of your co-chairs along with Sharon Paul.
I'm Sharon Paul Rupri. I'm assistant professor in the Department of Women and Gender Studies here at the University of Winnipeg. Sorry, I'm smirking because I just think you're all beautiful. Look, this is amazing. Give yourselves all a round of applause. Like, this is, I'm a co-chair over here. I hope that everyone, I know that, we tend to, sorry, I'm going off script now. It's going to freak Chantal out a little bit. I just want to make sure that, people are sitting together and connecting. And if you already know the people around your table, do take a moment to, get up, move around and meet people, because we do want to make good new connections going forward. Okay, so University of Winnipeg, we first want to acknowledge that we are gathered here on Treaty 1 territory and in the homeland of the Métis Nation. Special thanks to Elders Myra Laramee and Albert Mccloud for conducting a pipe ceremony this morning to start the gathering in a good way.
Just a couple words about that. It was such a beautiful ceremony. There were a handful of us that gathered in the dark on the lawn outside and had a beautiful pipe ceremony in downtown Winnipeg. And we had the pride and the Two-Spirit flags flying at the university. It was such a beautiful event. And it was an important reminder that our ancestors are always walking with us. Like, those are the teachings that we've been given, and the work that we're doing today and the work that many of the people here have been doing this kind of work for many, many years, and our ancestors continue to walk with us. So in that spirit, I'd like to call up Elder Albert Mccloud to come and do an opening prayer for us in this room and to acknowledge the Eagle staff that we have with us.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Albert Mccloud, and what I'm going to do is an invocation, and across many belief systems across the world, we call them prayers, or I tend to call it an invocation. And an invocation is to inform us that, yes, we are human, but we're also very dependent on nature for our survival. So it's that reverence and respect for nature that this invocation is about, because we need nature, we need the wind, we need the sun, we need the water in order for us to be human. So this is the invocation, and it's honoring this eagle staff. This is the Two-Spirit eagle staff that we carry with us. And the eagle feather is from nature. The eagle is a spiritual being in the Indigenous culture, and it flies very high. And it flies so high that it eventually disappears and we can no longer see it. And because of that, we believe that the eagle is able to enter into the spirit world. And that's why it's revered, is because it has the ability to carry our invocations into the spiritual realm. Some of the Indigenous people or other peoples across the world carry eagle feathers. That's their gift as feather carriers. Their role is to bring those feathers to us as community, to show us that we still have that connection to the spiritual world through those eagle feathers. And that's why they're here today, is that we are spiritual beings. It's no accident that this gathering here today in the university is looking towards Two-Spirit and queer people of color as part of the institution, as part of knowledge, as part of education. And also that to acknowledge that we are spiritual beings and we all have our belief systems. And so to me, we are grateful for our life today, for our families, for our children and our families. We honor the four directions and the winds and the energy that brings goodness and healing from those four directions, brings knowledge and wisdom, and that as we stand together as people, we welcome each other into the circle, and that we share our gifts with each other in the few days, and that our knowledge will be transferred into the 7 generations. Miigwech.
You can take your seats. Miigwech, Albert. Before we go any further, just a few quick housekeeping things. Please turn your cell phones off during the presentations. Also, please don't take any photographs or record and post to social media without getting the permission of the people that are appearing in your photos and videos. We do have Nanise Ibrahim, can you wave? Here she is, from UW Communications, who will be photographing the event, as well as Amanda Kindzierski at the back of the room in the blue. She's waving. She will be filming the event. If you do not wish to appear on photo or film, please inform the registration desk or find Dr. Rowan Crow. There she is, waving, pink hair. Red. If you have any messages for the other delegates and whatnot, you can also leave those at the registration desk.
So just a little breakdown. So part of starting off this gathering in the right direction was forming an elders council. This council is a mix between two-spirited elders, which they mostly are sitting over here. They want to give a little wave. And QPOC elders, which we have Dione, I believe, here. Dione, do you want to? Yeah. And we are humbled by their knowledge, and we are blessed with having them here at this gathering. You will hear more in the first plenary panel. You'll hear more from them in the first plenary panel. They have agreed, the elders have agreed to host a wellness room, which is located in 2M70, second floor of Manitoba Hall. If these conversations, dialogues get too heavy, or maybe you need a little bit of peace and quiet to sit and reflect, consider the wellness room this place. There's Chris, who is, Chris is not in the room. Chris is right there, actually. Chris, just give us a wave. Chris will show you and direct you to the wellness room, or any one of us will do the same thing. So take a moment, I think, in the next 3 days to visit with the elders, or the wellness room. We also have a testing room hosted by 9 Circles Community Health. This room is located across the hall from the wellness room, so 2M67. STI, testing nurse and health educator has been provided by 9 Circles Community Health. And more information can be found on, I believe, page 13 of your program. As well, okay, washrooms. I know, this is a big topic these days. Washrooms? Okay. Washrooms maps can be found, a washroom map can be found on page 24, 25. Is that correct? Yes? Okay. We have bathrooms on this floor. We have all gender washrooms actually in our new building located across the lawn at Leatherdale Hall. So that's actually right through these doors. Across the hall, you can see Leatherdale written on the building. And they have washrooms on the first floor, which are all gendered washrooms as well.
So how did we arrive at the C2C conference in the first place? We began, a few of us sitting around a table talking about the ongoing marginalization of Two-Spirit and queer people of color in society at large, but also within our own communities and within the larger LGBT community. So we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could host a gathering and invite people from these various communities to come and be with each other and build better relationships. So we have invited leading and local, national, and a few international Two-Spirit and QPOC scholars, activists, and performers, as well as LGBT and cisgender heterosexual allies to play a supporting role. Importantly, since the early days of the conference organizing, we have partnered with the Two-Spirited people of Manitoba, as well as QPOC Winnipeg. Representatives from both organizations will be invited up here shortly to say a few words. In terms of goals and objectives, we're hoping to contribute to the development of a national network of Two-Spirit and QPOC, as well as LGBT and Allies. We're also hoping that the dialogue that we have over the next few days can highlight where our communities intersect, what efforts are needed to reconcile our relationships with each other, and how can we better celebrate and acknowledge our gifts and our achievements. We're also hoping to have everybody participate in drafting calls to action that can be shared widely with individuals, communities, organizations. Sharon Paul will briefly talk about the format of the conference.
So we wanted to generate connections and dialogue amongst everyone in the room. Therefore, we've organized the 3 days around plenary discussions around 5 themes. And these plenary discussions, conversations really, will set us up for our roundtable discussions afterwards. We ask that you consider potential calls to actions. What we have on the tables right now, there's a purple sheet and sort of a white sheet with staples on it. What we've done is we've provided you with roundtable discussions, you know, how to have a discussion around a table, but also the questions that we had posed to not just the plenary panel, but we're posing to you to discuss and talk about. And then if you can, you know, select maybe a note taker at the table and ask that person to sort of write down a few things just on that sheet. These are important things. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from the, you know, if we can meet everybody in the room, we would. But we want to hear your voice and what you think we need to do going forward. The second part of that is the World Cafe presenters. They will be presenting on Friday and Saturday in this room from 4:30 to 5:30 on Friday and Saturday. The presenters will share their expertise for about roughly 20 minutes, and then followed by a discussion with the delegates at the table. You can find a list of the presenters on page 14 of the program. And this will simply be in this room, and you will, you know, whatever World Cafe table presenter that you want to attend and hear from, you will join that table and really have a good conversation afterwards. We then have organized 3 after-hour events. Now, these are very exciting. Tonight's events, we have collaborated with QPOC Winnipeg to host Drop the Mic with local 2S QPOC performers such as Joshua Whitehead and Hiromi Goto. The Goodwill Social Club is just down the street, so just down Portage Avenue, in walking distance of the University of Winnipeg. Uzoma likes to say it's going to be lit. It's true, okay. Tomorrow night we have a Red Rising magazine launch at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, which is in the other direction, but also in walking distance. And they will be launching issue number 7, which is their first Two-Spirited issue. It's very exciting. This partnership has been something that the Red Rising Collective has wanted for a while. Your name tag actually, so the launch is in collaboration with the WAG's new art collection, Resurgence, which has been curated by Jamie Isaac and Julie Nigam. Your name tag, if you turn it over, will give you both of those events, and if you just show that, that will get you in for free. Finally, on Sunday, because if you're not tired after 2 dance parties, did I mention there are dance parties at both these events after? Okay, yeah, dance parties, great. Finally, on Sunday, we have a closing feast at the Thunderbird House with performances by Gwen Benaway, Rosanna Deerchild, and the Southern Thunderbird Drum Group. If you make it to Sunday, I plan on making it to Sunday. You all will be there too, I'm sure. Chantal?
Thank you, Sharon Paul. Now that we've shared a bit about the purpose, the goals, and the format of the conference, we would like to invite remarks from our community partners. I would like to call, again, Elder Albert Mccloud to bring greetings from the Two-Spirited People of Manitoba. Albert is a founding member of Two-Spirited People of Manitoba and a longtime activist who continues to work tirelessly for Two-Spirited People.
Again, good morning. And earlier I said welcome to the circle. And for Indigenous people, it's important that we welcome all people to our circle. We're told by our elders and our traditional people that our history on this land extends 10 to 8,000 years, especially in the Winnipeg area. We have a very long history of welcome people to our territory because it is the strength of our history, our knowledge, our science, our technology, our survival in winter that has enabled us to live here for 8,000 years. And so we welcome you into this territory, to be who you are, to share your knowledge, to live your life. In the program, I talk about the inception of our work began in 1986. And it was about the loss of two gay men who were Indigenous, who died in the city because they felt there was no hope for them. They were struggling, and they chose to exit this world. And so it galvanized us then, and we haven't stopped in 30 years. We haven't stopped the momentum. And being in institutions like this, creating space, taking space, in many cases we're taking space back that we should have been in initially. The university, the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the Thunderbird House. And so I see you all as activists just by showing up here. You are movers and shakers. The cultural imperative for the Indigenous people is animate life. And in that animate life, we're obligated to live as fully as we can, to share our gifts as much as we can. And so the calls to action are just that. They're not recommendations, they're about action. And that we don't slide back into old ways of being, that we have that courage to create new ways of being. And that's what this is about. It is entirely possible to create new ways of being from this day forward. And do you know who relies on us? Our children. Many of us are parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, and those children are relying on us to do this work beginning today, and so that their spirits can be energized, their view of the world they live in can be energized. Because we're not only helping each other, we're saving this planet, right? A bigger obligation. And Indigenous and queer people all over the world have that obligation to lend their voice, their energy, their knowledge into saving this planet. So, thanks.
Thank you, Albert. I'd like to call on Uzoma Chioma to bring greetings from QPOC Winnipeg. As a founding member, QPOC Winnipeg, Uzoma is a dedicated leader, activist, and an amazing organizer for the QPOC community. When I returned to Winnipeg a couple of years ago, everyone kept saying to me, well, have you met Uzoma yet? Have you met Uzoma yet? And I was like, now I've met Uzoma. Uzoma?
I'm hoping that last comment was a good thing. Now you know what that means. Okay. Hi, my name is Uzoma Chioma. As Sharon Paul already said, I'm one of the founding members of QPOC Winnipeg. If someone could please, I'll happily give my phone to anyone who can put that Wi-Fi password on there and hook that up. Just putting that out there right from the get-go. I would appreciate that. Yeah, this is a really great start to what's going to be a great weekend. I'm feeling very grateful to have been a part of this coming together, and really grateful to the University of Winnipeg and Two-Spirit people of Manitoba and everyone who's been involved with this process. It's great to see community members out. That was our biggest priority. One of my biggest priorities was making sure the community was aware this was happening and then felt comfortable enough to access these spaces. So it's really nice to see so many faces from the community here today. And, you know, really on behalf of QPOC Winnipeg, I'm just here to say thank you to the community and to institutions who support the work that we do in community. It's been about a few years since we started, and QPOC started as sort of what was supposed to be maybe 1 or 2 or 3 dance parties a year, and it quickly evolved into something else. And there's a lot of people involved now, people who consistently support our events, people who reach out to us, people who do a lot of really good work, who often don't get, they don't get to stand up in front of a mic and give greetings. So there's a lot of thank yous that need to go out to a lot of people who, on a day-to-day basis, do the work that often goes unnoticed. So thank you to those people. Thank you to everyone today. Sharon Paul. I'm sick. Sorry, I'm trying to not cough. And Chantal and everyone else. And if you want to reach out over the weekend, you can reach out to myself. There's a lovely person named Renu who's also a member of QPOC. Renu, give a wave. You're here. It's great. Wonderful. There's Lou over there. Lou, you want to wave? Wonderful. Dion over here. Yeah, there's people kind of scattered all over the place. So come say hi, get to know us, and, let's connect and keep building from here, because this is just a part of a much larger process. So thanks.
Miigwech Uzoma. I would now like to call up President Annette Trimby to come and give greetings.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real honor to be here. My name's Annette Trimby. I was recently given a spirit name, and I'm sharing it with you because I'm trying to figure out what it means. Spirit bear woman. I think it means a lot of responsibility, Myra. It does. So anyways, I will come and visit you. We're just really happy you're here. One of the things that I think a lot about is the role of universities in these conversations. And many, many years ago, I was a student here at the University of Winnipeg, and we started to have these conversations, but we really didn't have a lot of events where community came in. And I absolutely agree with you, Uzoma. Now I've met Uzoma. I feel special. Maybe by the end of the day, I'll know what drop the mic means, because, I think I know, but I could be wrong. But we do think it's really important that we create spaces, or as Albert has said, community comes in and takes back space. And these spaces need to be safe, they need to be inclusive, and we need to talk about things that are sometimes uncomfortable to talk about. Not for anybody in this room, but the irony is we need to get some people who wouldn't normally be in this room. I want to acknowledge all of the work that went into the planning of this event. And I have this feeling that this incredibly large steering committee of scholars and academics and community members and staff, you're already a long ways there because of the goodwill and the good work that you've done in getting organized for today. So I know today's conversations are very timely and very relevant. I know why they matter. I've met young people that are very confused about who they are, and I know that they don't always get the signals that they need to really express their talents. And let's face it, we would all agree the world would be a better place if everybody gets to shine. So I'm just very proud that we're having this. I haven't said thank you to enough people, but I'm really looking forward to learning this morning from the panels. So miigwech, and thanks for coming to U of W.
I think I don't know what your name might mean, Dr. Trimby, but it might mean fearless leader. Maybe. Thank you for that. We received We received a video greeting from the Special Advisor on LGBTQ2 issues from the Prime Minister of Canada, Member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre, Randy Boissonnault. We would like to thank Mr. Boissonnault for his continued interest in our gathering. And I'm just going to ask if that slide can be played, please.
Hello everyone, Randy Boissonnault here, Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on LGBTQ2 issues, and I want to congratulate the University of Winnipeg and all partners for putting this call to action conversation with queer people of color, trans people of color, and Two-Spirit community taking place this weekend in Winnipeg. I think it's fantastic what you're doing. I know it's going to be a historic conference. You have speakers from a broad range of backgrounds, including Senator Murray Sinclair and his family. I think what you're doing is important work for advancing the cause not only of reconciliation, but understanding intersectionality and understanding how we as parliamentarians and how people at all orders of government and indeed the Academy can actually work together to make sure that our policy considerations actually reach people on the ground where they live. So congratulations on putting this amazing conference together. I look forward to all that comes from it.
So we want to thank Mr. Boissonnault for his welcoming remarks. At this point, we're going to take a short 10-15-minute break. We have some delicious donuts from O Donuts at the back of the room. Coffee, tea, fruit, water. Please help yourselves. Talk to each other. Let's get to know each other. And we'll start in about 15.
When you come back to your table, you should know 2 new names from people in the room. 2 new names. I will test you. Okay.
Hello, everybody. We are about to get started momentarily. If I could have everybody take their seats. Also at this time, can I please call upon the first panelists to come and join me on the stage? So that is Dion Haynes, Elder Myra Laramie, Elder Albert Mccloud, Elder Raven Heavy Runner, and Uzoma Chioma. Yes, please. Have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. We're going for a more relaxed environment here, so hopefully we're all feeling that way. So before I call upon Elder Barbara Bruce to open the panel with a few words, can I ask the room, is there anybody who would like the services of American Sign Language? Can you raise your hand? Because if there is nobody who is requesting this service, we will not use that service. Doesn't look like right now. We can ask again at the other panels. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Miigwech. Elder Barbara Bruce, could you please come up and help us open the Origins, History, and Resurgence of Two-Spirit and Queer People of Color panel? Come on down. Come on down.
So I just saw that video from, is it Randy? He's a good speaker, eh? He speaks really fast. You can tell he's a politician. Good morning. Tanshi, nitisnikasun kichi penesupimanao, agua maingindo dem, agua Barbara Bruce. I also would like to acknowledge the Treaty 1 territory that we're meeting in, and also the homeland and the heartland of the Métis Nation. And before I start my notes about being two-spirit and what that means to me, I wanted to just note that Sharon Paul or Chantal said something about dancing tonight and tomorrow night and maybe the next day. I have a cane. And at the pipe ceremony, and the pipe ceremony was like a little village, a little cocoon this morning. But Myra and I were reminiscing about how we used to dance at Miss Purdy's. And I have to say we were really good dancers, or we thought we were. We thought we were, eh? They always thought that we were partners. And we are, in a way, we're sisters, eh? I think Myra wanted to date me, but... There's still time, Myra. I have to tell my partner, Mallory, I'm divorcing after this 2-3 day session. She'll wonder what the heck is going on at those sessions. But anyways, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very honored to be here. You know what? In 1986, this is what Myra and Albert said. 1986, Marjorie Bocage, Elder Bocage, Myra and Albert were meeting in a house, Alverstone, eh? And 609 Alverstone. And they were already planning. They were planning my life. They were planning two-spirit people's lives. And I just came out in 1986. So I didn't have a clue what they were planning for me, but I'm certainly glad that they did plan. In 1990, I attended the first two-spirit gathering in Bossier, Manitoba. And I can tell you, the buildings that they have now were non-existent. The showers that they have now were non-existent. We were showering outside, a made-up shower. And I really loved it. There were people there from all over Turtle Island. There were people there representing Indigenous nations from all over Turtle Island. And Myra's vision, she'll talk about that, about those two words, two-spirit. That gathering founded the words two-spirit, or accepted and welcomed it and invited it. We talked about identity at that gathering. We talked about our historical roles and responsibilities that we had a long time ago, and that we should take control of them today, that we should take them on today. How we contribute as two-spirit people to our families, to our communities, to our nations. At that gathering, we had an opportunity to create, and as I said, a little village, our own little two-spirit community for several days. To feel safe, to feel free. We cooked and ate together. Well, Albert did most of the cooking. We conducted ceremonies together, and ceremonies is so important for me as a two-spirit person. And we felt free in those ceremonies, not being told what to do, not being told what to wear. We laughed and we cried together. For me, that gathering, that first Two-Spirit gathering that I attended, was awe-inspiring and as well humbling. And I'm so grateful for those two words, Two-Spirit, and very grateful for subsequent Two-Spirit gatherings. I embraced the term Two-Spirit. It made sense to me. It made me feel good. It made me feel like I had finally gotten home. Home. In reclaiming the pride of place that Two-Spirit held in our communities, I felt then that I could move forward with pride and without shame. It changed my life. I belonged and belong to a collective of people with like mind, like spirit, like roots. I remember that feeling, that place. I remember who I am every time I go to ceremony, every time I attend a function or event, every time I am with family, and I don't ever forget it. It's so important to me. It touches my heart. Now we're going to hear from the panel. Members who are going to talk about the origins of Two-Spirit and QPOC. And I'm sure, like I am, we're looking forward to it. And I would like to now pass it on to your moderators, who will be introducing your panel. And I want to remind each and every one of you that there is a wellness place on the second floor, and we welcome you as elders here to come and talk in private, to smudge with us, and to share and care about each other. Have a great 3 days. Egose, merci, miigwech.
Gitche miigwech, Barbara. Barbara is one of my spiritual teachers, and I'm very grateful for her generosity. Those were beautiful opening words, Barbara, miigwech. And really, please do take some time over the next few days to go and hang out in the wellness room. Even if you are currently unfamiliar with sweetgrass and sage and smudging, it's a great opportunity for learning and relationship building. Just a couple words about the format of how this will happen. After I introduce the panelists one by one, they will each have a few minutes, like under 10, to share what they want to share about the origins, history, and resurgence of Two-Spirit and queer people of color. And then after that, we'll open things up. We've got some wireless mics that will we can pass around, and hopefully we'll start a dialogue among the panelists. We've got some guiding questions. They're free to bring in whatever ideas and additional discussion questions that they would like. And then following that, basically they're starting off our dialogue. So we thought it would be appropriate to have our elders start us in this way. And then we all will continue the conversation in breakout tables afterwards at around 11:15. So please allow me to introduce Dr. Myra Laramie. She is a member of the Fisher River Cree Nation. She is Kapan, grandmother, mother, sister, daughter, and friend. She has been an educator for over 41 years and practiced as a teacher, counselor, and administrator in the Winnipeg School Division, the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Centre, and Aboriginal Education Directorate, as well as an elder and traditional knowledge keeper. Myra holds a Bachelor of Teaching, a Bachelor of Education, and a Master's in Education. She graduated with her doctorate in October of 2013. Her research is founded in Indigenous knowledge and practices as they relate to teacher education. Myra carries a traditional bundle for the Indigenous people of this territory and understands she is responsible for the transmission of knowledge and ceremony for women and children through the use of a teepee lodge. She also believes that education can be a tool for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit sovereignty. Albert Mccloud is a status Indian with ancestry from Nisichawayasik Cree Nation and the Métis community of Norway House in northern Manitoba. He has over 30 years of experience as a human rights activist and is one of the directors of the Two-Spirited People of Manitoba. Albert lives in Winnipeg, where he works as a consultant specializing in HIV/AIDS and Indigenous peoples' cultural reclamation, as well as cross-cultural training. Dione Haynes is a writer, poet, and comedian, co-founder of the Woke Comedy Hour, along with Alyssa Blackwolf Kixon, an open mic for Indigenous women and non-binary folks of color held, sounds like more than twice a month. A regular contributor to From the Root zine, which features artworks from and for those of the African diaspora and others of the marginalized majority. Performer and participant with QPOC Winnipeg and Black Space Winnipeg, Dione most recently sat on the panel discussion for the film screening of Get Out. Raven Heavy Runner obtained his Master's of Social Work from the University of Washington in 2003. For the last 3 years, he has worked for the Mccloud Tribe's Elder Program. Raven was raised both on the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana and in the Seattle Urban Indian Community. His life experiences include the Bureau of Indian Affairs boarding school attendee, a Seattle street kid, a U.S. Army veteran, stage actor, Two-Spirit leader, Native activist, and college graduate. Raven has worked as a social worker since 1999 and aspires to work solely within the Two-Spirit communities. And Uzoma Chioma, unfortunately I don't have her bio with me. She's going to jump in. She's actually helping us out. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly? Okay. She's a fantastic person. As everybody who has come up here has said, if you don't know Uzoma, you're missing out. So,
There's only two.
Apologies, Uzoma. Okay, so this brings us to the portion where each of our esteemed colleagues on stage here can share from their personal knowledge and experience for a few minutes before we open up to a dialogue. So, who would like to go first? Albert, you want to go first?
Sure. Just in terms, I think it's clear there's enough information about there, I think, about the history of the Two-Spirit movement in Canada. Even though, some organizations and communities struggle with Indigenous LGBT identities and inclusion and those kind of things, it has been a long movement, and it really goes back to, in terms of my historic memory, to 1975, when Randy Burns and Barbara Cameron began Gay American Indians in San Francisco, and were involved in the marches on Washington. So was that 25, 35, like over 40 years ago. There was a community movement about informing Indigenous people in North America of the history, the realities, the lived experience of queer Indigenous people. And unfortunately, that history has really been forgotten, lost intentionally for about 100 years. So those efforts of Randy Burns in the early period and Barbara Kramer in begin this work of identity and rightful place in community and nation. 1979, a queer group began in Vancouver, and I was part of that very early on. I became a princess, and my name was Princess White Owl II. And it saved my life, actually, because I was a prairie chicken out in the West Coast, really out of my depth. And it was the West Coast Indigenous queer people who saved my life, because they took me under their wing, which is a traditional welcoming and adopting into their culture. And I think it's practiced all over North America that we do that. We adopt each other and create these safe spaces, safe families, and parent each other, right, as we move forward in life. And so our movement, as I said, began in 1986 with the loss of these two men. And I estimate today they would be about 45, right? And they would have had careers. They might have graduated university, right? So this is what this is about. It is really, shining the light, putting a voice, and sharing our gifts, which is our knowledge, our intelligence. Many of us are really gifted people. And we love life, and we love to dance. We love color. We're artists. We're speakers. And that's what we really need to share. And just before I stop, I just want to reference Dr. Reese Malone, because Raven and I and Myra, we were involved in the early parts of HIV/AIDS education in North America. And it really brought sexuality, gender identity, gender politics to the Indigenous community. And we're still doing that work. And at the pipe ceremony, I mentioned that I don't believe it's a coincidence that in Winnipeg, we're actually having hearings at the Radisson Hotel on the inquiry for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. And I truly believe that Two-Spirit people have to have a voice in that inquiry. I talked to the federal government about that, and I says it's a genderized inquiry through the federal government. Because when you say Indigenous woman, what does that mean from a cultural lens? How does it represent the voice of Indigenous lesbian women, trans Indigenous women, trans Indigenous men, and gay men, right? And there's no answer yet. And that's my work. That's what I'm focusing on right now, is I'm working through the commission, through the commissioners to do that gender analysis that should have been done before this inquiry began. Same with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This is the 94 calls to action. There's no gender analysis in this process. There wasn't. It was an 8-year process, and that's the problem. When you have academics, sitting around the table, making decisions, and not being inclusive. These things happen, and they keep happening. And so, it was alluded to that all of these 94 calls to actions include Two-Spirit or Indigenous LGBTQ people. My question is how, right? How do they do that? It's not in here. And it's up to whoever to define how they're going to do it. And for the most part, if you're homophobic or transphobic, you're not going to do it. So that's why with this inquiry, we want to prevent that, and that really that inquiry has to be part of dismantling a colonial gender binary construct. That's part of colonization. And it's all over the world. It's just not in Canada. Anywhere you go, you see violence against women, it's a colonial history, right? So I'm at 9 minutes now. I got 1 more minute. Just in closing, I want to reference Dr. Reese Malone, who's on our Elders Council. And Reese is a sexologist, and that's so important to Indigenous people. Like I said, with HIV, sexual behaviors, whether you're gay, straight, bisexual, or whatever, that's a part of our spirituality. Our sexuality is part of our spirituality. And I always remember Reese talking about desire and attraction, right? That's called horniness. It's okay to talk about it. It's natural. And in our conversation, hopefully when we come out of this, we can talk about it. That it's okay to have sex. It's okay to be sexual. It's okay to have gay sex or whatever kind of sex you want. And so it's very important that Dr. Malone has brought that we are able to talk about who are we attracted to? Who do we desire? Right? Because it's art. Sex is art. So, and I think we'll see that in the next couple of days, maybe at the Winnipeg Art Gallery tomorrow. But again, you know, it's the artists that kind of do that work for us. So, Mccloud.
Is this thing? Oh yeah, it's very much on. Good morning, everybody. So when I found out I was sitting on this panel, I thought about my journey as a queer black woman living on the prairies. I came out at 37, which is 35, 12 years ago. And I find it so interesting that we live in a society, as Albert has already clearly, I was going to say alluded to, but you did not allude. When you say horniness, you are not alluding to anything. The relationship with sex that we have in this society is so fragmented and so broken. And when I think of sexuality and gender and the long list of wonderful things that come out of being human, once again I have to reference Elder Reese, because right after our meeting we started talking. We're like, what are we going to talk about? I have no idea, or I have very little idea of what my cultural practices are. I have some ideas, but not as much as I would like to, especially being almost half a century old. So, you know, I really hope that we can all discover ways to honor those parts of ourselves. Elder Reese and I were talking about how living in this world at this time affects our eroticism, which is not just the relationship, the erotic and sexual relationship we have with other folks, but also the relationship we have with ourselves, because we all got here somehow, wink, wink. And so, you know, when we think of origins and ways to honor that, if we have this fragmented, negatively fraught relationship with sex as a society, then we're here to hopefully heal that and curate practices that move us forward and upward. So we'll talk more later. Thank you very much for coming, everybody.
I guess I'm next since I got the mic. So I grew up in Montana on a small reservation, and I think I was kind of lucky in a way. My mom's baby brother was Two-Spirit, and kind of paved the way. I have another brother of mine that is also Two-Spirit. There's 4 boys in our family and 5 girls. And seeing how he went through our community and those people that were good to him, we knew were safe, and those that were not, we knew, you know, not to talk about certain things. So, you know, I'm really grateful to my elders to be able to, you know, for them to pave the way for me to be here today. When I first came through Winnipeg, it was back in 1992, and I was with a group of actors doing a play, and it was a Two-Spirit play. well, actually, I was a two-spirit person in an anti-Columbus play. And it was very interesting because I had an opportunity to, because the play had to do with Indigenous people, a lot of Indigenous people came out to the play, and somebody had told me at one of the dinners afterward, there's an elder that wants to talk with you. And so the conversation that I had with her was really an interesting conversation for me as a young two-spirit person, because I was just coming into this identity, and there was a young person who was writing a book and had asked for like the different experiences that people had in gaining intellectual knowledge and bringing it to the university areas. And so I had an opportunity to write a little bit about that conversation. I was surprised that they actually had the book here by Kevin Kumashiro. And this conversation that I had with her, for me, was really empowering because she talked about not really understanding who two-spirit people were when she was asked by these young Indigenous people to help them understand traditional knowledge in medicine, and she brought them into the circle. And the conversation I had with her, she said they didn't realize how powerful they were. And when they started doing some of the ceremonies, she said, it took me years to be able to get to where I was at. And they seemed to be just like flying through, you know. And she said the power that they had was really unique as two-spirit people. And she said, and I didn't even know what two-spirit was until I started, you know, talking with them. Well, taking this back to my own community, and at the time, we were kind of we were with a group called People of Color Against AIDS Network, and we were basically involved more in the LGBT community and realizing that there was a lot of racism within the majority, the white community, toward people of color. So a lot of the people in those organizations, in those communities, realized that they were being marginalized, both with the money that was coming out around HIV and everything. And so they just, a lot of them left the field. And in talking with some of the people within my community, I said, you know, we're in a way kind of wasting our time working in the LGBT community at that time. And so we started talking amongst ourselves saying, you know what, who we are as two-spirit people, we were not created as two-spirit people for the larger community. You know, our belief was it was for our Indigenous tribes. And so that, you know, they're the ones who named us. They were the ones who gave us our names as, you know, Natle and Winkte and Akaskasi, and these things that they told us, this is who you are, and this is the role that you play within our communities. And so for us, because of colonization, we had been separated through the boarding school process and through the removal of our lands process and through the removal of our languages. And so for us, the journey to go back there and start finding our place as Indigenous people, because we were not finding it in the mainstream community. It was really important for us because a lot of people were losing their way and they were dying. And so that was one of the things that we said, that if we have a major tenet within the work that we're doing, let it be that reconnection back to our communities. And I came out of a time when I don't know if anybody here remembers Queer Nation. And we were like really in the face of society, you know, going out there and doing all these actions and kiss-ins and all these things, you know, within, you know, our communities, you know, taking over, you know, either going to a club, and that was a straight club, and, you know, a bunch of, you know, same-sex couples dancing. It was really kind of freaking people out. Or we'd go on to, you know, the buses and, you know, hold hands and, you know, just these different events. And so it was really in your face queer visibility. Well, when I got back into the Native community, I realized that that really wasn't going to work within our community, within our elders and stuff. And so, you know, I had to like explore different ways of engaging our community, and I realized what needed to be done for our people, because words are words. Actions actually speak volumes. And so we talked amongst ourselves and we said, you know what we need to do? We need to just roll up our sleeves And if there's a particular thing that needs to be done in our community, go and work with these different groups that are either youth groups or elders groups, or if there's a particular thing that needs to be done, go and do that with them. And at some point in time, the conversations are going to come up like, so who are you all? Then we would have the opportunity, because then they would know that we are invested in our community, and this is who we are. We're Two-Spirit people, and this is what we're meant to do to help our community. And so now I realize, and talking with other communities of color in my area, that there is a need to come back together again and to create this collaboration to address some of the issues, especially with, as you know, what's happening in the States is really horrible within our national politics. And so it is having us realize that we need to get together and we need to work together to be able to address a lot of those issues, nationally, and especially within the Two-Spirit LGBTQ community. So I'm hoping that we get a chance to explore some of those ways of doing that while we're here this weekend. And I thank you, and I feel very honored to be here today. Thank you so much.
So I grew up in a predominantly white community just south of the city called St. Norbert. And I was born and raised in a Nigerian family. I'm Nigerian. And so growing up, I sort of, in terms of my identity, I felt like, because we were very connected to the Nigerian community in Winnipeg. So as someone who was raised in a fairly strict Nigerian household, if I wasn't at school or doing school-related things, then I was with my family. I wasn't one of those kids who could go to bush parties and all that kind of nonsense. My parents would call it white Canadian nonsense. So I was very much, I understood culturally who I was. I knew how to tie a head wrap and wear my tradi clothing, and I know how to celebrate the things that we celebrate. I knew our food. I loved our food. I was totally cool with bringing, stockfish and fufu in Tupperware. I see a fist go up, aha, to school and dealing with that. So I knew how to be Nigerian, and I knew what that meant, and I was really proud of that. And then I knew how to fit in with white people. And I knew what I needed to do to get along and fit in with white people and be accepted or tolerated by white people. And there was no in between in that for me. And so growing up, I identified with Nigerian culture and then trying to fit in with white culture here. And it made it very difficult as I got older to understand exactly who I was in all of that. As a black person, a first-generation Canadian growing up in Winnipeg, it was challenging to sort out my identity existing in communities where neither really accepted or had a place for a queer black woman. So as I got older, I realized, and as I became more comfortable with being queer, which wasn't really until my early 20s. Actually, I wasn't comfortable openly identifying as queer until I was in my later 20s probably, but it became very, very apparent to me that part of that was because there was a lack of representation. I had no role models. I had no queer black role models that I could see or access growing up. And so for me, I literally did not realize as a child and a teenager that you could be black and be gay. I did not think it was in the realm of possibility. In my community, it was not ever talked about. It was literally never talked about. There wasn't a person who was, to my knowledge, suspected of being gay that people would, low-key talk about. There was it was not. I wasn't even allowed to talk about boys or talk about dating boys. I wasn't allowed to answer a phone call. Boys weren't allowed to call my house. So there was to even conceptualize being black and Nigerian and being gay was not a thing. And then, growing up in a white community, predominantly white community, the only gay people that I ever knew about were like maybe basketball players when the WNBA came out in like 1997, but that was maybe it. And even then it was not really talked about. So it, as I got older, it became really obvious how important it is to have representation and visibility. And because, I mean, this was obviously when I was growing up as a kid, there wasn't internet, you know, for the most part. You couldn't Google things on your phone and look up whoever. There was no social media of any kind. So there was just no way to access other people with similar experiences. And so, yeah, as I got older, I began to feel increasingly alone. And, you know, I was networking. I was an athlete. I played basketball here at the University of Winnipeg. And you think playing basketball, like this is going to sound stereotypical, but you think you meet a lot of, you know, lesbians playing basketball. And I did when I left Canada to play basketball. It was amazing. As soon as I left the country, we're playing Team USA, and it's like 70% of their team were lesbians. It was awesome. And they were openly gay, and they were just walking around on top of the world. They were bringing their wives and their partners to major tournaments. I couldn't believe it. It was incredible. But here anyway, even as a university athlete, there was still a lot of homophobia, transphobia. There were a lot of closeted athletes, a lot of, like most of my teammates who I now know to be gay were closeted when we were in university competing with each other and competing against each other and across the country. So it, as I moved away from athletics and as I moved more into, you know, my boring adult life in healthcare, I became increasingly alone. You know, I'm connected to the community. I'm feeling like I'm going out more, and I'm going to the gay clubs, and I'm going to events, and recognizing that there's really no community for queer people of color to feel safe. You know, you go out to these places and you try and meet people, and trying to be gay and be queer in Winnipeg and try and figure that out. And it was so traumatic sometimes, having people tokenize you, being fetishized, being demoralized in public spaces, and having that be the norm. And so QPOC, when I started thinking about, it was actually on a drive home from work, I think on a Friday or Saturday night, and I wasn't tired. I wanted to go out and do something. And I couldn't think of a single place that I could go and feel comfortable and feel safe as a black queer person in Winnipeg. I was like, if I go to the black club, I'm going to see all my friends, my community, my black community, who don't know that I'm queer. And I was afraid for them to know that I was queer, because that would mean that the Nigerian community would know that I was queer. And that would mean that I wouldn't be able to comfortably access spaces with a community that I've held very close to me because of that. I couldn't go to, you know, just a regular nightclub, because if I did that, then it would mean that if a song came on with a heavy backbeat, everyone would look at me and expect me to twerk. Literally, because people would look at me and ask me to twerk. That's happened. It would mean that, you know, if somebody thought I was attractive and thought maybe his friend might be interested, he would first have to make sure that I understood. He'd have to check with his friend and see if they were okay with interracial relationships. It was all these kinds of things happening all the time. And on that drive home, I realized if I was thinking and feeling this way, if I was processing all of these negative experiences that I've had and feeling like there wasn't a space for me, there had to be other people who were thinking and feeling the same things. So I called up my friends and had them come over the week later, and we had some food, we had a lot of wine, and we started sharing. And this became sort of a regular thing. We would just bring food together, we would get together, and we would start sharing our experiences. And we all realized we were all thinking and feeling the same things. Nobody wanted to say it necessarily, because some of it was embarrassing. Some of it was really hard to talk about. And a lot of it you couldn't say in spaces with white queer people because you didn't want to hurt people's feelings, or you didn't feel you'd be taken seriously, or you didn't think they'd understand, or they'd minimize, tell you that you're wrong, that it couldn't have happened that way, that wasn't actually how it was. So we shared that space, and we built that space for quite some time. And then I went to Nigeria for, family holiday. It was December. It was a few years ago. And my mother had asked me to essentially be straight while I was there. And I knew she didn't want to ask me that. And me being queer is not something that we really talk about. It just doesn't really come up, and it's fine. I know she accepts me, she loves me, it's all good. But she made a point of having that conversation with me because she was scared. And she said, you are who you are, you're outspoken and you're comfortable and you walk in your shoes, and I'm proud of you for that. But while we're home, could you just maybe not? And that was all about safety. And that was difficult. It was extremely difficult to have my aunties praying over me for me to have a husband sooner than later because I was approaching 30. It was difficult telling me that I'm so marketable, but I'm running out of time. So when I got back to Winnipeg after that trip, which was excruciating in a lot of ways. It was amazing. Got to see family. It was wonderful. Landing in Nigeria and seeing nothing but black faces and black people was like the best feeling in the world. I can't even explain it. The heat, it was hot, sweating all the time, sweating from every part of your body, and the smells and the markets and the African people. And it was the most rewarding and fulfilling and uplifting experience. And it was also incredibly difficult because I couldn't be myself, and I had to pretend, and I had to be quiet and all these things. So when I got home, a few months after I got home, Nigeria passed the anti-LGBT laws. And QPOC had been going for maybe a year, somewhere around there. And I had to make a decision. I had to choose whether or not to continue being open and public about the work that I'm doing here, and that some folks, the small group at that time, very small, the work we were doing here, I had to choose. I had to either keep doing it and choose to be very quiet about it. Like, I can't have it on any of my social media. I can't tell, my cousins can't find out, because things in Nigeria are difficult for a lot of people, and people are desperate in a lot of ways. And so Nigeria is incredible. The economy in a lot of ways is great. But there are a lot of issues. Or, I'd have to be quiet and minimize my visibility, or I could just keep going. And I made the choice to just keep going. I made the choice to be visible, to be smart, to make smart choices, but to be visible and be vocal, because I did not want, and I don't believe that young Nigerian kids growing up anywhere, young black kids, young African kids, young kids of color, should grow up literally not believing that they exist out in the world, not knowing that they can become whoever they want and live a queer life and be happy and fall in love too many times, choosing the wrong people over and over again. And so it was from there that, QPOC kind of really picked up speed, I feel, because I had to make a choice to just really dig in and do it. And I was fortunate enough as an adult, I met Dione a long time ago, probably earlier than what she remembers, because I admired her from afar. I called her my black unicorn. And I had known that Dione had actually started a QPOC initiative. I found that out when I was probably in my mid to late 20s, that she had started a QPOC initiative years prior. And so I knew that somebody had done it, that somebody had taken that step, and that inspired me to try and see what could happen. So that's a little bit about how QPOC started and why I feel it's important. And it's something, it's gatherings like this that I think are pretty special. The fact that, you know, there's QPOC people here, there's Two-Spirit people here, there's white people here, there's allies here, and we're sharing knowledge and we're sharing stories. And not all of it is easy and not all of it is positive, but at the end of the day, I hope it's optimistic and that it's honest. And that's how you build, I think. So, yeah.
You ready, Mama? What time is it?
We got plenty of time.
Good. I'll take it.
Here we go.
I'm going to announce myself by a name that I rarely ever use. Dancy. Ogi mawi anagaduk ojuweji anagaduk. That name was passed to me after my first fast, during my first fast. And the old lady from Treaty 3, where I did my fasting in Sabascon, told me that was two names, but it must never be separated. Mildly translated, it talks about she is blue sky woman with clouds in the rainbow who is chief of the sky world. And in our tradition, it's men who are given those responsibilities. The women are given responsibilities closer to the earth world. So she looked at me and she said, Niju Manituk is what this is called. She was translating through her son. And I had no idea. I had no idea. So I came from there, and I had a chance to look after this woman who was fasting on the ledge grounds. And I was her nighttime singer. I came and sang her to sleep. And we smoked a pipe before we did that. So I looked after her with the pipe, and she was in a really bad situation because her leader husband, her chief husband, had taken her children away from her. And she was fasting to get them back. And in fact, we had to call off the fast because her kidneys were not good. She was fasting without food or water for 15 days already. So we called a physician to come and check her out. But during that time, during that 15 days with her, she asked me one night to come and sleep. And she was staying in a Sundance teepee. And it was peculiar because that particular evening I didn't bring a jacket, it was warm, and get in my car and go home and go to bed. But that didn't happen that night. And she didn't have extra stuff. So I laid down with my head on her mattress. And I had this very, 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 very vivid and long dream. But the part that I will tell you about is a part that is relevant to what we're talking about today. During that dream, the Mccloud, the teepee went and it disappeared. And I was standing out in the middle of the ledge grounds with these 7 orbs traveling around me. And I don't know if you've ever seen these vignettes. They don't show them very much anymore, where a face will turn from one to the other, to the other, to the other, male, female, old, young. And these orbs were doing that. And today still I learn from those teachings. I will be taken back there when they know I'm ready for something new. But that night, one of them stopped in front of me, and it was changing from this Indigenous man to Indigenous woman to Indigenous man to Indigenous woman. And the man stopped, and he looked at me and he said, "You are as we. We have been here since before the beginning of time, as you have been and always will be. You are as we are. When you walk this earth, you will be called Nijumanituk." Which took me back to that Maggie Spruce who passed that name to me. And another one of the orbs came, and it was a woman who stopped this time. And she explained to me that Nijumanituk is the person who has the ability to be completely neutral in a time of adversity, in a time of hardship, in a time of struggle, in a time where people are not getting along, in a time where there are warring nations. That person has the ability to see this way, and that person has the ability to see this way. That person also has the ability to see straight down the middle. And it's interesting because my father, when I was a kid and growing up, used to say, "You know what, my girl, you're going to learn this when you grow up. You're going to walk amongst many people." And he said, "There will be this truth from this person. There will be this truth from this person. Your job is going to be to see straight down the middle. You will be a neutral person." Not once in all those different situations where Nijumanituk came did they say it was the manifestation of gay and lesbian. And Albert and I have talked many times about those visions and dreams that I had, the name that I was given. And when we went, was 89? When we went south? 88. We went to Minneapolis. It was the first North American Native and Gay Indigenous gathering in Minneapolis at the university. And there was a bunch of us out on the lawn, on the front lawn of the university. And I was just sitting and shared those visions that I had about Nijumanituk. And almost before we got home from that gathering, there was something in Toronto that said two-spirited people of the First Nations. I looked at Albert and I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, you told the dream." And so all these years, I've been overwhelmed and amazed and blown away by the adoption of that vision as an identity for people who have been hated, marginalized, brutalized, killed. I used to run a gay support group when I was a counselor at Argyle High School. And these 23 young men brought me out because they asked me how I, as a straight person, could love them and care for them and get up in the middle of the night and go and pick them up when they had been raped with a broomstick. And I looked at them one day and I said, because I'm like you. They were the ones that took me to ceremony in Roseau River. Nijumanituk is a way of living. It is honorable and it is blessed. And it's not for me to say, no, you can't do that. That's my vision, because it isn't. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the world. And however it is that the world is going to use that vision is up to the young Indigenous people who pick it up. Because my belief, it is part of the prophecy where it says that there will be things that are left by the trail. And it's up to us to go and pick them up. And these are the things that I'm beginning to understand at 65 that are left by the trail. That vision wasn't for me. It's part of me, and it's a part of who I am. And my responsibilities, my duties, my rights, and my privileges that come with Ogi Mawi Anagaduk Ojaweji Anagaduk. And I rarely ever speak that name out loud. But I know in here I'm safe. And I'm free. And I'm just like you. And you're just like me. And, you know, my granddaughter's 22 in November 16th. And her mother's in Ghana getting married again. She lives in the Ghanaian community. She's named Myra Laramee. And I think of her today when I'm sitting beside you. Because she walks in a world where she's half Cree and half Ghanaian. She's 5'10", nothing like her nugum. In fact, I lost 2 inches when my surgery came. I'm 5 foot now. Can you believe that? I'm 5 foot. But I think about, you know, those 23 young men that I used to work with at Argyle High School. And from what I've been able to figure out, there's only 9 of them left. they taught me what chicken hawks are. We used to have a session every night in Giovanni's basement. You ever tried one a gay support group with a whole wall of mirror and young men? And so we did. We had it there every Tuesday night. And Glenn Murray, the old mayor of Winnipeg, used to run it with me. And we were up having a Coke at the break. And he said, you know, he said, it's interesting. He said, there's no chicken hawks on Tuesday nights. I said, what's a chicken hawk? He said, it's all rich white guys who want to go after young Aboriginal men. Oh, why aren't they here? He said, because Mama Giovanni's in the house. And that was my name on Tuesday night, was Mama Giovanni. But those young people, they had more life than most people I know. And I remember Albert and I used to drive down Higgins just to catch up and see if they were still around, see if they were still working or alive. And we were driving down Main Street, and he said to me, look, he said, there's our dream keepers. Look, there's our storytellers. Look, those are visionaries. He said, that's not where they belong. But for most of those young men to go back home was dangerous. For them it meant their life. Because most of them were here because they were thrown out. They were thrown away. And I wondered what it was like when my Auntie Rilia she was 98 by her count, but when we looked at her stuff in her suitcase, she was 103 when she left the earth. And she told me about a time when our people were valued and had very specialized treatment in the community, were protected and looked after. Like my cousin Freddie. My auntie, his mother, made sure he had a house in Peguis before she passed. And he lives in her house now. That's how our people used to be looked after. We searched for a long time for names that we would be called in different tribes and in different nations. And we didn't come up with very many. But one of the grandmothers told me that in Cree country, there wasn't any names. They would just, on Mom's Reserve, they'd be just called those two old ladies or those two old men. Go and get them there. We need them for ceremony. And in Ojibwe country, I was told by my other granny that manly-hearted women would be adopted by the men. And cross-dressers, trans, would be adopted by the women. So there wasn't need for a name. So in that respect, the search for a title of identity is equal to entitlement for a place on this earth. And if Niju Manituk does it for our people, then so be it. Kiam, let it be. let it be. And I have young people who are in my family that are walking tall and strong. My niece Justine just finished her 4th year of Sundance and her 4th year of fasting, and is pledged to go again. And you know, when you have your own relatives, it's one thing to look after kids who are not necessarily your blood, like the boys that I worked with. But when you have your niece watching you, to see how she could be a strong woman, strong as you, honey, too. That's a blessing that I never thought I'd see. Because my mother, when I came out, disowned me and pronounced me dead. Told me not to bother with her or try to talk to her. And I didn't for 2.5 years. And I went to a ceremony one day. There was something happening at Grandma Noja's in Roseau. And I went with my friend Wella. And the ceremony was my mother getting her Indian name for the first time. She was pledging to Sundance. So I never thought I'd see her again. But it was my grandmother, Nojikwe, who put us together. We can't ever know how things are going to work out. But we have to trust in those powers that we each believe in, how differently they may be. That we're looked after. And we are a blessed people. And I'm very, very, very honored to be here with you. In fact, I ran away from work today. So I thank you for the time that I was given. Maybe I should say.
I don't know about you folks, but I could sit here and listen to this wealth of knowledge and experience indefinitely. We have a few minutes to kind of get a dialogue started, and then we'll continue that with everybody in the breakout tables. So can I ask, in each of your sharing, you've all sort of touched upon some of the challenges that our communities have faced as Two-Spirit and queer people of color, some of the ongoing challenges that remain in our communities. You've also spoken about some of the successes and about the emergence of these beautiful role models, including yourselves. What do you think might be some, how can we do better? If we're thinking about calls to action, to specific individuals, communities, maybe institutions, governments, how can we do better?
I have a specific one, University, and like Myra said, you never know what the future's going to bring, and you just have to go with it and believe, and really it's about belief. But a number of years ago, I was at the Thunderbird house, which is on Higgins in Maine. And that's a vision for Winnipeg about urban planning. It involves all the Indigenous teachings about space and ceremony and community. And it's been there for 17 years. And I remember being there at an event, and the former president of the University of Winnipeg was there, Lloyd Axworthy. And he heard there was a sweat lodge going on at the same time, so they took him out and showed him the sweat lodge. And he came back, and he's looking at me, and we're talking. He says, well, you know, University of Winnipeg should have one of those. And that's one of my calls to action at this university and other universities, have to build teaching lodges, teaching halls, sweat lodges, because that's our university, right? Our teaching lodge, we were one step ahead of these universities because we were mobile, right? And just with regard to Raven being here from the United States, that 49th parallel split all these teaching lodges, these communities that were mobile, because our lodges would go into Minnesota, right? There's a very famous book written about the Medewan ceremonies in 1895 because of that 49th parallel, that border. And so those elders agreed with an anthropologist to share that knowledge because they lost 4 million square acres of land. And they were no longer to have these teaching lodges come into their territories from the Canadian side. So to me, I think this is to do, because we had that pipe ceremony out on the lawn this morning at 7 o'clock. We shouldn't have to do that in this institution. We should have our own space where we could do our ceremonies, right? That is knowledge. You know, what we're doing, the actions of what we're doing have been preserved for thousands of years and have not been discarded. That's why they're still here in 2017, right? Because they're valued by Indigenous people, because they work, right? They work. So to me, I think that's one of the calls to action for this university. I know it's invested in indigenizing the university. So you need to indigenize a space that reflects Indigenous ways of being, Indigenous ways of gathering, Indigenous ways of sharing, and Indigenous ways of healing, which is Lloyd Axworthy's initially intention for the building of the sweat lodge on this campus. I see a lot of buildings being built here, but I don't see many Indigenous buildings being built here. So that, for me, that's one of them that we could leave as a legacy for this university, is that we visioned it here at this gathering.
I would say one of the most important things, and we're seeing a shift now, is becoming very apparent that people of color are sick and tired of white people controlling our narratives and telling our stories and representing us and presenting us. So I think that, you know, QPOC folks controlling our own visibility and how we're represented is super important, and telling our own stories and sharing our own stories and creating our own spaces. You know, a good example, the Real Pride was going to screen a film here that's about Marsha P., and the film was, you know, greenlit and given money. It was a white gay man who was given all these resources to create this film that's getting a lot of accolade, but it's a film, the research for that film, like over a decade worth of research and then some, was done by a trans black woman. And the erasure of our stories and our voices happens all the time. And I think one of the actions that needs to take place and be ongoing is that, you know, people need to stop thinking that they can do things for QPOC folks and need to just let us do our own thing. You know, we're taking up space, we're creating things on our own, but if people really want to be helpful, then just give us your resources. Stop giving your resources and sharing your resources with other white people. You know, like, why are you funding people who already have funds and have their stories told and their voices amplified? So I think that it's super important that QPOC folks, QT-BIPOC folks, that we take up space, that we create space, that we tell our own stories, that we present our own images, and that we do the work authentically from ground up, collectively, and that, you know, you build relationships within your own communities and you strengthen your own communities. I see often folks feel this need to reach out beyond our communities and kind of think about reaching up or something, thinking that will help our communities when in fact we've got tons of resources and tons of capable people and skills in our own demographics, and we have to start building each other up and accessing one another and being there for each other and building these things for ourselves with each other. And allies are great, and if you get an invitation to the cookout, then show up. Otherwise, just, you know, provide the resources that folks are saying they need and let it happen.
One of the things that I was involved in this particular university was being part of the Indigenous Requirement Course Committee. And I spent a lot of years at the University of Manitoba doing work in the course that nobody wants to take, the Indigenous Requirement Course, and facilitating that and feeling like I was treading water but not even moving anywhere, besides the fact that I don't even know how to swim. But when I got here, I was excited when I started doing the Indigenous Ways of Knowing course for the inner city. I never remember this name. Urban and Inner City Studies. Thank you, McGraw. And I think it's 8 years now that I've been doing it. And one of the things that I asked in that committee when I sat with them is, how are the students in this university, because every student in this university is required to take one of those courses to have on their transcript in order to graduate. How is the student who takes this Indigenous Requirement course going to be different than when they came into this university by having taken that course? And the room went really quiet. Really quiet. And so I was excited to be asked to look at, I think I did 22 of the courses, to review the courses. And one of the things that I begged that day that people consider is Indigenous pedagogy. And if you don't know what it is, then ask, because somebody will tell you. And when I reviewed those courses, there was only one out of all those courses that had one piece of Indigenous pedagogy. The rest of them were great Eurocentric courses and outlines, assignments, with a slam of Indigenous knowledge thrown in on the surface. But how does a young person understand what it feels like to learn in a circle? Looking at each other every time they get together, knowing that they can be a teacher and a learner in that circle at the same time. And that when they sit down their ass on that chair, it's no higher or lower than anybody else. To go out to the land and actually feel what it is that Mother Earth is trying to tell us. To listen to traditional songs that have a story to tell that are 4,000 years old. That's how long these songs have lasted. I actually was quite disappointed. And I know that people put their heart and soul into creating those courses. And I get that. But the understanding of what Indigenous pedagogy is missing. It's not there. And my hope is that somebody is going to ask to go to a sweat lodge to find out what Indigenous pedagogy is. Let me sit in a sharing circle with kids for 12 weeks, every Saturday morning. Have them journal what it means to be learning as an individual in that class and be part of that collective that is made up of young people who are half Chinese and half Ojibwe, who are half Hindu and half Cree, who are from the Philippines, who are from China, who are from Nigeria, to be part of a collective of young people who have a voice about what they want this world to look like, sound like, feel like, and live like. And I've got news for you. Indigenous pedagogy isn't complicated. There are 4 things you can do. You can have your students look, listen, learn, and when they're ready to, they're going to damn well live it because you believed in them. It's as simple as that. I told somebody that once, and they said, oh, no, Myra, it's more complicated than that. It's as complicated as you want it to be, or as simple as you need it to be. Because I have sat with Nigerian grandmothers, I have sat with Hindu grandmothers, I have sat with Ghanaian, Iranian, I've sat with people from all over the world, grandmothers from all over the world, and they all say the same thing. It's not that complicated. It's simple. Have our kids look at each other, listen to each other, and grow with each other. That's how this world is going to change. My granddaughter has a website and is her own person because she's part of the movie industry now, and she showed us, my son and I, her brains last night because she made this makeup. She said, here, Nugum, Dad, here's my brains. This is what they look like. I said, oh, gross, man. But she's her own woman. And she knows she's Ghanaian, and she knows she's Cree. And so I'm going to get off my rant right now. But she's my model. She's my role model now. Because she did that on her own in Toronto. With a long-distance support of her Nugum and her dad. My oldest son. So it's possible for young people to be mixed, but not mixed up. And I spent most of my year being mixed up. And now I'm just Métis, that's all. And I love who I am. Thank you.
Oh, miigwech. Yeah, round of applause. I wish we had more time to listen to these very knowledgeable individuals. We can continue these conversations in the breakout tables. I just want to make sure to leave some time for that. I do want to say, Gichemigwech, thank you very much to each of you for taking time out of, I know you're all very busy, you're in high demand, so we're grateful that you have taken time from your schedule to be with us and shared some of your very valuable, important lessons. And I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the incredible, emotionally challenging work that you have been doing for so many years and that you continue to do. You're all role models of mine. We do have a little token of appreciation that I will pass to each of you. Can we give them one more round of applause? Thank you. We're going to ask now to open up the discussions at the round tables. There are instructions on each of the tables. We're asking that someone from the table volunteer to be a facilitator and someone volunteer to be a note taker. And then at the close of this session, the note takers, could you please bring your notes over to the registration table? Anything else? I think we'll just, and of course, can we please ask that you join us at the tables to continue these the dialogue. So let's get started with that. Thank you.